is this all kind of head turning for you, or does it feel like you're just kind of going with the punches?
It's surreal. And then it's exciting, and then it's overwhelming, and then it's intriguing, and then it's hard work,
This part of it.
Yeah, this is hard work. I was like, oh, this is what actors, this is the work, actually. Because, this is the stuff that you don't get trained to do, and then suddenly you're doing it, and you're doing it every day.
I would think if they had people to train you how to do it, they probably wouldn't be training people at schools because they'd be doing it. It's like the people who are doing it are doing it. It's truly those who don't do teach, or something like that. So you are nobody to really mess around with to start with. You have a PhD in political science?
No, that's my father.
Oh, your father got it for you. Okay.
No. I have an MFA in acting and from Yale.
From Yale. Mm-hmm. So that you didn't. I got your IMDb page needs to be fixed. I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, there's so much stuff. What? No, that doesn't.
It was somewhere in there.
Maybe Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is the one that's changing.
Evil Wikipedia.
It's the one that's changing every day.
Is it changing every day?
It seems, yeah. People always tell me, like, someone told me that in an interview, someone asked me, so you live in Brooklyn with your husband and 3-year-old daughter? I was like, no, I don't. He said he got it from the Wikipedia page. I was like, no, don't believe it. Yeah.
But you're young enough to actually be hip to the internet room. You're not. Are you somebody who's on Twitter and on those things?
No. I don't do those things. They're overwhelming to me. They're just really overwhelming. I don't have anything to say, like in a tweet. And it's too much pressure to have your thought in just 140 characters. So for me, it's not for me.
So before you got your degree at the University of Chicago, which you don't have.
No.
When was your first thought about being an actor? Were you a kid who wanted to be an actor? Or?
Mm-hmm. When I was really little, I always loved to perform. I was the child who preferred to sit in my cupboard in the closet and play with my Barbies in the dark, and then go outside and like ride a bike. I loved make-believe, and my mom tells this story about when I was like 3. I hadn't even been to school yet, but she had a guest over, and I spun this tale about how I went to school and what I'd had for lunch and what uniform I wore and who I'd played with and everything. And my mother was just like, this child is bound to be in the performing arts. Yeah, so it was an early passion, and then it wasn't until I watched The Color Purple that I thought, maybe I could do this in my life, because it was like people that looked like me, and I remember Whoopi Goldberg especially really moved me, and that was the first time that I thought, maybe I could be an actor. But it took a while before I actually uttered it out loud and said that that's what I wanted to do.
It's an interesting thing, because I think we've heard that kind of thing expressed by people of color over the last 20 years, but things have changed so much. I think people forget how it's still a real thing for people who don't see as much racial, many racial products. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. And television and film and everything else. It's just the imbalances.
Well, and I grew up watching a lot of everyone else. Like, we had American television, we had Australian, English, Mexican soaps, all that stuff, but we didn't have any original stuff on TV, and it was because our government was in the business of stifling creative expression. So we didn't have anything of our own. So The Color Purple was the closest it got to something that I recognized,
So when did you become politically aware of that kind of thing? Was that
what
something
do you mean?
Well, it sounds the fact that you're conscious of the government creating, stifling creativity.
Well, yes. My father is a politician, and so I grew up in a political world. Of course, I didn't always understand it, but I was always in that world. My father was put under house arrest, was detained without trial, so he was missing for some time. So I was always aware of like a larger force. And then of course the political vocabulary is just something that came organically. I don't remember any specific moment, because it was politics was my father, is my father. Yeah.
So were your parents hoping you'd be a political person, or as opposed to an actor, or I guess maybe you could be the same thing?
I know. Yeah, Oh dear. Well, my father is a thespian, and he was an actor as a child, so he was thrilled to have someone who was interested in doing that. And my parents have always been very good at like listening to their children and encouraging us to go the way we feel we're called to go. You know, they're not the kind of parents that tell you what you have to do. But I must say, my dad was very upset when I dropped physics. He was not pleased with me. And I was like, hey man, it's not my style.
So when did Yale come into the picture? Was Yale a place where you knew Meryl Streep had gone, or?
No, I actually didn't know any of that. When I was at Hampshire College, and a friend of mine, his name is Gilbert O'War, and he and I did a production of Romeo and Juliet when I was 14, back at home. And he got into Yale. And he told me about it, and I was like, what? You got into Yale? And he was like, yeah, I'm going to the acting program. And I was like, what, there's an acting program? And he planted the seed in my head that, first of all, there was a place where I could train to be an actor, and then that a Kenyan could get in. And that's when the idea got planted in my head, and then I kept it to myself for a little while, and then finally I decided that, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. But yeah, I didn't know about the program until Gilbert got in.
So how was your immersion into Yale? Was that easy conversion? Easy?
It was, those 3 years were the best years of my school life, hands down. And at the beginning, of course, I was like, first of all, how on earth did I get in? And but the dean gave this talk of a first orientation talk, and he talked about the imposter syndrome and how everyone in the room was probably going through that feeling, like I tricked them into getting here. And he was reassuring us that we were all going through it. And indeed, I was sitting next to my classmates, and some of us broke down crying because we were like, yes, I thought I was on my own, but no, we were together. And you know, it was so reassuring to recognize that almost every artist feels that way, and that therefore you're not as unique as you think you are, and that's a good thing, you know.
They often feel that way even after years of working professionally.
Always. And the thing about acting is that you're always taking on new stuff. You're taking on a new role. So just as soon as you feel like an expert in something, you have to leave it and go on to a totally new thing and be ignorant and curious and fresh again. And that's what's so wonderful. It's what's wonderful and what's extremely frustrating about this business.
Because you don't like leaving things behind so much, or you don't feel like you're done, or?
Well, because then you don't feel like you know. You have to confront the fact that you don't know with every new role you take on. There's so much you don't know, and that's a vulnerable place to be. You know, when someone hires you because we think you're brilliant. We saw you in that other thing and you were amazing, and then you have this new role and you have to learn the new role. Yes, you have the tools and everything, but you have to learn a new person. You know, and that's scary.
So, was there a point where you became, again, conscious of this kind of thing, that it went from the idea of being an artist and being artistic to actually being something where you had to find your way to do it and come up with methods to make all this work?
Wait, what's your
Well, just that you finding your method, your personal method to.
Yeah, so at Yale, what they do is another thing they said. Ron Van Loo, the head of the acting program, said to us, "You're not here because we're going to teach you how to act. You already know how to do that. What we're here to do is to give you the tools to do what you do to the best of your ability." And so the 3 years at Yale is all about giving you tools, you know, not rules, just tools. And you pick the ones that work for you and leave the ones that don't. So I'm fortunate to have had that time to develop my personal craft, because now I understand the things that I respond to. And so I can tailor make my preparation for each role, and I have like, a whole bucket of tools to pick from.
So how did you come to 12 Years a Slave?
I auditioned. My manager, Dee Dee Ray, received the script for her client, Garrett Dillahunt, who's also in the film. He plays Armsby. And she saw the role of Patsy.
The most underrated character actor in all of America. He's so good.
Isn't he?
He's always good in everything.
Yes.
He's in all these movies, sales movies and this movie.
Yeah, but that's how you know he's good.
Yeah.
Because then
directors love him.
Yeah, and he kind of just blends into his character, you know. Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
he's
interrupted you,
incredible.
sorry.
But anyway, so she received it for him and saw the role of Patsy, and she thought I'd be good for it. So she had me go on tape with my other manager, Ellen Novak, in New York. And then a week later, it was at the same time that we were doing the Yale showcase. So we had a showcase in New York. At the time, I put myself on tape. And then the next week, we went to LA. She invited the casting office to see my work. They invited me in the next day. Francine Maisler put me through the ringer in a 1-hour audition. And then finally, about 2 weeks later, I was sent down to Louisiana to meet Steve and audition with him.
A little bit intimidating to meet Steve?
Extremely intimidating. I think the first thing he said to me, I was like, he said, he met me downstairs and he was like, oh, you're really beautiful. We're gonna have to do something about that. I was like, oh no, what? No. Please choose me. But yeah, it was very intimidating because I'd just seen Hunger and Shame in preparation for my audition, and I was so intrigued and awestruck by his honesty, you know, and the fact that he's the kind of director that lets the actor do the work, you know. His camera is patient, and you have room to just like breathe with his actors, and of course that's something that I wanted to work with. Yeah, and he's just so unflinching when it comes to the truth, you know. He wants the truth and nothing but the truth, and I really wanted to rise to the occasion. Yeah.
Well, John's script for this is great, but it's also, particularly Patsy, really is often a near silent performance. It's almost like you're really in Steve's hands almost more than you're in the hands of the screenplay in this situation.
That's true.
Was there a lot of conversation about that, or what you were going to do on the day, or did you get rehearsal in? Did you get anything?
Well, Steve and I had a number of conversations starting from my audition with him, and one thing he kept repeating was that Patsy is simple. She's not noble, she's simple. And so that really did govern how I went about trying to play her. To find this woman who is not sentimentalizing her pain, she's trying to get through it, you know? And, you know, to do that with agency and dignity, despite the fact that she is enslaved and has very little agency of her own, any little real external agency. Yeah, so we had that conversation. Of course, most of the conversation we had, I don't remember because I was just like, so nervous. You know? I'm sure I wrote it down somewhere. But Steve doesn't like to belabor with the actor with too much rehearsing. So he only does what's necessary. So me and Michael rehearsed for less than 15 minutes before we got on set. And me and Chotel probably rehearsed for 15 minutes. And that was that. And that was a doozy because, I mean, I'd come from a theatrical background where you rehearse for 4 weeks, you know. So I really had to develop my own rehearsal schedule before I got to Louisiana.
And so was going up against those guys a little intimidating as well? Was that?
Oh, yes. I was extremely intimidated. When Steve called me and told me he offered me the part, I was so excited and my heart leapt, and then it sunk because I was like, oh my God, I don't know how I got myself into this situation with these actors, you know, and how on earth am I going to rise to the occasion? But then again, I had to remember it's the imposter syndrome, and I had to be comfortable in my discomfort. Yeah, and I remember, but sure enough, I thought he was going to call me and fire me until I got on set. Every single day I thought, they're going to fire me, they made a mistake, I'm going to get the call today. And the call never came. And then I was in Louisiana and rehearsing with them, and then in my first rehearsal with Michael, he turned to me and said, "You are my peer." And that was a load off my shoulders. And Steve said to me, "Thank you for being born." And I was like, it's a wrap. I'm here, you know.
Well, Michael and
I'm here
Chotel
to stay.
give you very different energy in the movie.
Yeah,
Obviously, the characters are so different. Is it different working with each of them, or is it really the same actors?
Michael is fire and Chotel is water, and both elements are intriguing, mysterious, and dangerous. And that was what it was like working with them. And I think that's why they make such good scene partners, because they have such different energies, you know. Michael anything can happen with Michael at any time, so he keeps you on your feet. And with Chiwetel, especially with this character he's playing, he was grounded, and he was still, and he was present, he was focused, and he was calm. And I think he really did set the culture on the set, you know, and allowed it for us to do this with ease. He's also a very efficient actor, you know. So with both of them, you know, you go in 110%, and then you come out and you're totally out, and you're going paintballing and you know, and dancing and stuff like that. So it was good to have that kind of work ethic where we're fully focused for the time in which we're bringing the story back to life, and then we leave it. I don't remember ever talking about the story, like the script. Very little did we speak about the script offset. And yeah, it was about just trusting that we were each doing our individual work, and then coming full to like let go and give the scene, just leave everything in the scene.
So was the whole day just exhausting and a giving of energy even when you were not on camera necessarily? And then,
yes.
Then you go behind? I mean, is that...
Well, no,
what were the days like on a set like that?
It was, you know, it was a lot of fun for everyone, because everyone took ownership of this film. Every single person. It felt like everyone's individual film. And so the focus was high, the energy, the excitement, the joy. We had so much fun making 12 Years a Slave, because we knew that we were embarking on something remarkable, you know, and that the story could speak for itself. So we put it all there, and we had fun doing it. And you're surrounded by people that are incredible. Like the set designer, ridiculous. The costumes, I mean, wow, you know. And you're seeing magic happen every day, and every single person is adding to the story and making it the masterpiece that it is. So we had tons of fun, tons of fun. Actually, at one point, Andy Dylan, who was also the combat, the stunt coordinator, he introduced us to this app on his phone called Songify, and that has taken the world by storm. But we'd never heard of it. So me, Michael, and Chiwetel and Andy created this techno song with our favorite line from the movie, you know, and then we played it back, and it's like a ridiculous song, and we were having so much fun. And yeah, because we knew that this is the real deal. This is the thing we got into this line of work for.
So dare I ask, what is your favorite line from the movie?
What?
Dare I ask what your favorite line from the movie is?
Mine, it's too many, but one that's really cool is when Michael's character, Master Epps, says 40, 50, 150 lashes. That's scripture. That he moves from 40, 50, and then jumps to 150 lashes. Like, that's what you get for, you know, disobeying. When you go against a master, you could get 40 lashes, you could get 150. And that's the lunacy of this man, you know. Yeah, and just those numbers.
Yeah. No, it's a great line in terms of his character, because that's where he is the whole movie.
Yeah.
So the controversial, it's not really controversial, but it's a scene that upsets a lot of people is the whipping scene. Particularly hard day? Was it more technical for you in terms of the camera being in movement all that time and having to play all the different things you had to play with that sequence? Or
yeah, you know, it was actually, maybe it was one of the more technical scenes, but for my whole shoot, Steve and Sean have such a seamless relationship, Sean Bobbitt, the cinematographer, that Steve's way of working with his actors, he doesn't bombard us with too much technical information. And he also always shoots the integrity of the scene. At least that was how he did this film. So I had a lot of practice just going through the entire scene, always. So when it came to that day and he said he wanted to get it in one shot, I didn't have to adjust anything, because that's how I'd been doing everything anyway. But of course there was technical aspects that I needed to pay attention to. Of course, they couldn't actually be whipped, so I had to respond to the crack of the whip, and I'd hear the wind of it as well. So there was that. But it was manageable. It didn't take over the acting work that I had to do, and for that I'm eternally grateful, because it's one thing, it's like a moment of deep despair, and to have to think about hitting many marks would have, I think, diluted it for me. And so it was that day, everyone was, it was a sacred set that day, and it was an open set. Of course, there was no way to shut it down, because this was an event that happened in public. And Solomon Northup in his books describes that day as the darkest day of mankind. Even on the Epps plantation, that day was an anomaly. Epps plantation, where whips would be heard from the crack of dawn to the fall. What's the opposite of crack of dawn? But anyway, from dawn to dusk, whipping would be heard, and but that day was still different. That whipping of Patsy, the scathing of her back. So it was intense, but at the same time, I was just confronted with the fact that I got to do it for fake. I got to do it in an imaginary world where this woman actually lived this, and not always just centered me, and quietened me, and allowed me to be present.
Well, the request for a form of escape is resonant through the entire film, particularly when you get to that sequence. It's just you kind of know what she saw coming, her kind of prescience, her kind of understanding of what was going to happen, the inevitability of it in a way is kind of profoundly floats through the entire movie, I think.
And for me, Patsy's relationship with her master was always extremely complex, because she was a favorite of the master and mistress when she was a child. She was a slave in the house. She was fed with milk and biscuits, and she was coddled and treated well, until Master Epps gets a sexual interest in her, and then she's sent out into the field, and the torture begins, and the jealousy and that whole triangle begins. And so that spoke to me of a woman who looked at these people as her parents. These are her parental figures, and they'd betrayed her and broken her heart in this way. And so it also spoke to me of the Stockholm syndrome, where you're traumatically bonded to the people who cause you the most harm, and you loathe them, but you love them at the same time. And how heartbreaking that must have been to then be in this moment where you're entreating him to believe you, and he doesn't, and he beats you for nothing more than just a piece of soap. It was heartbreaking.
Well, it's one of the things about the movie I find fascinating is obviously it's about slavery, but I do feel there's a universality to it that reaches beyond the color of the issue of race or anything else. I mean, there's so many things about it that are not different now. Besides the fact that there aren't slaves anymore, at least in this country. And that's what the humanity of it is what kind of rises above the color issue.
Yes, exactly. And at the end of the day, it's about human dignity, and us recognizing that, and recognizing our potential for great cruelty, as well as the resilience of the human spirit, because the atrocities of slavery are not that far away. When you're on those plantations, you are flanked by oaks that are 300 years old. They witnessed slavery. Under those canopies, slaves rested, and slaves hung. And you're there in the present, as are they. I mean, it's so present. And we know human trafficking is still going on, and that to think that it is an inhuman, distant atrocity is to ensure that it happens again, because we have to recognize that we are capable of these things, and it's in recognizing them that we somehow prevent them from happening so often.
We forget that it scales down too. That slavery obviously is an extreme thing. The Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, was an extreme thing, but that doing it in a lower level of inhumanity is not okay.
No, exactly.
But we rationalize these things, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
So when did you see the movie put together for the first time?
In June. I had been avoiding seeing it And my team kept saying, I think you need to see this before you start the press tour. And I was like, I think I'm okay. You know. But then finally they...
What were you afraid of? What didn't you want to see?
Well, you know, we're not made to see our bodies in motion, right? And so whenever we see ourselves in motion, it's discombobulating, you know. And like, I don't know how I look when I'm talking, and I just didn't want an ego trip. You know, go, because I'd done this film and I'd enjoyed doing it, and I'd felt so generous and open in doing it that I didn't want to go and watch it and go through that ego trip, like, oh man, I hate the way my mouth does this, and look how I played that scene. You know, I didn't want to go through all that. And then also it was a very difficult place for me to be. The grief was something that it took me a while to get over after doing this film. So I was scared. I was scared about going back there. So anyway, but then eventually they convinced me that this was the kind of film that I needed to see in order to be able to do the press tour justice. And I'm so glad I did, because I was able to see what everyone else brought to it, and like, the actors in the rare form in this film, and Steve's work and Sean Bobbitt and everyone's work is so exquisite, and this story is told so beautifully and with such heart, you know, that by the time, and the good thing is that my character shows up a little later, so I was taken into slavery with Solomon, and I was sold, and I was in, and there was no coming out, you know. So by the time I came on screen, I was over myself. I was like, you know, I just went with it and everything, and I'm so grateful for that. Were
you surprised at all by how it came together?
I was dumbstruck. I mean, I imagined it was going to be beautiful. I imagined it was going to be powerful, but I could not. It went beyond anything that I could have imagined. How gorgeous everything is. And that's the thing about Louisiana, really, that this film does such justice, is that the place that these atrocities happened, these horrors happened, is so beautiful, you know. And that's what causes even more emotional turmoil, I think. And even in the book, Solomon Northup will describe the blossoms while someone is hanging in a tree. He was so observant, and he really did capture that that contrast, and you know, in such an eloquent, poetic way that you can imagine it, and now we can see it in this film.
So are you excited about it opening, or is that kind of another thing?
I can't wait for it to open, you know. We made this film for people to see, and so far, so good. People have seen it, people are loving it, people are taking it on and really just relishing it, and it's being received with the same passion and love that we made it, you know. And so now I'm so excited about it going out there, because it's a real gift. Steve McQueen has made a gift for the world that's going to stand the test of time, and everyone who sees this is so fortunate, you know. And right now, my family back home in Kenya, they don't have a release date. They're so jealous and like envious of everyone else who has release dates. So I can't wait for them to get to see it, and I'm very, very excited about it being given to the masses, to the people that it was made for.
And how do you go on to make bad movies or junk, or?
I guess you just do, you know.
Now that you've launched in this big way, how do you know?
I don't know, you know, that's the thing. I'm like, I don't know where I go from here, you know. But like, this has been such a singular experience for all of us, you know. At the New Orleans premiere, one of the crew members came up to me and he said, I have done over 150 films. And I pour myself into every film that I do, because that's what I do. I'm an artist. But seldom does the film pour back. And 12 Years a Slave has poured back. And he's like, now I can do any junk, because my career is made. And I feel similarly, like 12 Years a Slave is singular, and it's up there. And I will never try and replicate that experience. I hope to have like a varied career that stretches me, scares me, makes me live dangerously.